How's it going, YouTube? Come on, today with another video, and today, guys, what to bring to you is a complete guide to Salad. And so I really love this deck right now because I feel like it's really unprepared for, and a lot of people really don't know how to play against it. And for anyone who does want to pick up the deck and play it, because it is relatively inexpensive, I think that it is a really cool choice, at least right now in the rogue category, and we'll see if it really can push into the meta category. I don't know if it really will, but I do think that it is another deck right now that in the past couple formats, it really hasn't had the chance to shine. And as far as right now goes, they've gotten a lot of new cards and a lot of old cards back to make the deck really be able to push forward. And today I'm joined by Zach Poling, and I really do feel like you're going to get a lot of insight from him because he's been playing the deck for a very, very long time. Do you like Salad?
I love Salad. This is my favorite deck.
Yeah, it's a really fun time. I feel like the deck itself, even before, back in like Toss format, that deck was pretty scary because of the amount of extenders that it could hold in the graveyard and just the amount of plays that it had, and like Rage and Roar were always crazy. So I hope that you gain a lot from this video. And again, if you want to pick up the deck, I hope that this is something that you can really utilize to determine if that's something that you want to play and if it fits your playstyle. If you've not already picked up anything from the Imperium Duel store, definitely go over there and check it out. Use code GGYGO10, and let's hop right on into the video. So the first thing that I'll mention is I have Zach Poling here with me, and he's actually accomplished quite a bit. Let's talk a little bit about what you have accomplished.
Tapped a few things back in the day. Nothing too recently outside of, I don't know, haven't been really going to many events recently. I tapped a YCS, I think, before I tapped a regional, though. I tapped the YCS Toronto in... don't remember what year, but it was like Necros, BA, Shadow, Klee format. I was playing Shadows.
So like 2015.
Sure. They're all running together at this point for me.
And you got that Nationals top 64, you get a couple regional tops and the ARG top. It's it's definitely still cool to see that you're you're decorated and that you have a lot of really good information for everyone. So I'm excited to have you here today.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about Salad. Love this deck so much.
Always got to eat healthy, you know?
Yep, that's right. Balanced meal.
So I just want to go over the deck for everyone who's new to the deck and really wants to understand what the deck does, because I feel like that's really important when we're going over a complete guide, is that in the second half of the video, it's going to be more about the intricacies and talking about what the deck really can do now and any of the really cool interactions in the game. But at the same time, I feel like it's nice to go back to the basics and really be able to go over what every card does, because even if you know what the deck does, at least this way you have a nice reminder. So going into these events, you're not really blindsided by the deck. So if you want to talk about, even to start off here with Spinny and Gazelle, and like what their main focuses in the deck are and what their main functions are.
Yeah, so as you pointed out, you just want to load your graveyard with stuff, and then you kind of play through from there. Cards that like DD Crow and stuff that kind of pluck stuff out of your graveyard are kind of difficult to deal with. And but what I see people doing, maybe we'll get into this a little bit later, is sometimes they use them at weird spots, and it kind of lets the Salamangreat player kind of just like wiggle through and push for game or push for like a favorable position. It's just kind of, they have so many things going on that if you don't know what to do against the deck, you're just throwing away a hand trap on something that they have, another card that does the exact same thing. And you're just like, yeah, who cares?
Yeah, I feel like whenever you're going against the deck too, and like, so for those of you who don't know, the Salamangreat Spinny can send itself from hand to the grave and make something gain 500 attack, and then if you control a Salamangreat monster, you can free summon it to the board. Same with the Gazelle. If a Salad goes to the graveyard, so if you activate like Sign Up Mining and pitch a Salad monster, and then you add Gazelle, you can free summon it to the board as well. And then when Gazelle summons, you can send any Salad card from your deck to the grave. So I always feel like even here is a really good spot to Crow, because like if you don't want to deal with like the Rage or the Roar, a lot of the builds, especially now, only play 1-1, where they used to play like 2-1 for like one of the traps. I feel like hitting the trap cards even really impactful now with Crow.
Yeah, I think that probably would have been a better thing to do, like maybe last format or in some previous formats. But now I'm seeing some builds that aren't even playing the Salamangreat traps because they're playing Heat Soul, and they're kind of like flopping their strategy to more accommodate the Heat Soul. A lot of people will ash the Gazelle, or like try to hand trap the Gazelle, or like you said, DD Crow, the thing that the Gazelle sends. Because if say you open a handful of monsters, you got some Spinnies, you got Gazelle, you got your Jaguars, whatever. usually, like, the most reliable interruption you're going to be able to get to is the trap cards that you send off Gazelle. He's the only way to access your trap cards through your monster cards. So if you interrupt him, like if you Ash the Gazelle, you for sure traded with one of their trap cards because they can't get it out of the deck. So that's where most people do it. But now it's like that's not necessarily the way to do that anymore because they're using their extra deck to find more creative ways to get interruptions, whether they're going for like Appaloosa by playing like Parallel Exceed and stuff. So you stop the Gazelle and they're like, that's fine, Apple for 3 or Apple for 4. And then Heat Soul, like I said, just playing a build that plays a ton of hand traps and they're just, drawing them turn after turn. So now I think there are different places to hit the deck that are probably more reliable.
So
speaking of which, yeah, what are you saying?
I was like moving on from those two, like including like Jaguar and Falco into this. A lot of builds I've been seeing too, and a lot of people that have been talking about that have been playing Salad for a long time. Why do you feel like Falco always seems like the least wanted one in the deck? I feel like that's always is.
It's not. You might be able to intuit that by looking at Salad deck lists and they're like, why aren't they playing more than one Falco? But most Salad players I've talked to just love Falco, and I'm included. It's my favorite one. I like it even more than Gazelle. So for the viewers, it's got 2 effects. It can only use one of them per turn, and that's pretty important because both of the effects are very good, and you want to resolve both of them, but you can't. You can only resolve one per turn. If it's sent to the graveyard from anywhere, you can set one of your Salad spells or traps from the graveyard directly. Obviously, you can't activate it that turn. And its other effect is you can target a Salamangreat monster you control, return it to the hand, and then if you do, you can summon it from the graveyard. Side note, important to note, like if you target like a Balinx or an extra deck monster, you'll still bounce it to the extra deck, but because it wasn't returned to the hand, you won't summon the Falco. So you have to kind of bounce a main deck monster in order to summon the Falco. Both those effects are insane, especially the first one, because, well, for a variety of reasons. My favorite one is if you're trying to play through a board and you're pretty sure that's too risky to go for like an access code OTK and just like throw all your eggs in one basket. A lot of times you can go like, resolve a trap card or resolve a circle, get some value out of it, try to bait things, force a playthrough, and then your Gazelle sends Falco. Falco resets the trap because you're playing for another turn anyway. And if they were holding any responses for the Sunlight Wolf, which is where you get a lot of your advantage, they already messed up because the Falco's already getting you your set. It's kind of a way to I refer to it, I haven't heard anybody call this, but it makes the decks like grittier. It means like if you can just keep stepping on and interrupting and slapping the deck around, but it's still going to have a play. And Falco really helps with that. It makes it very durable against hand traps.
See, and that's why I wanted to have you here today too, because there's a lot of people who say like the deck is only, you need to go and just kill with access code. Like that's the only thing the deck can do now. It doesn't have grind. Like the only thing it does is access code OTK. And I feel like where that's a really good part of the deck, the Salad that I remember has always just been a ton of grind and something where you look at their graveyard and it doesn't matter if you have like one Shark Cannon or one Crow, like they have a lot of options to be able to access. So that's what I really like about the deck. Even the more control-y builds with like the Heat Soul like you were talking about as well, is where a lot of the deck gets its power. Especially even Falco. Like that's a big conversation that I've been having with people where I'm like, well, why don't you value the Falco? It's very good. And they're like, well, I'd rather go for like the Gazelle and like the OTK. And I'm like, you got to remember the deck is still a grind deck and it still really wants to be able to have that. So I really do like the inclusion of this card and the ability to be able to get that reset as well. It's really impactful.
Yeah.
And then, talking about Jaguar too.
Jaguar though, yeah.
Crazy card.
It's a crazy card, really vital to the deck. I've been thinking about. We keep referencing Heat Soul, and I'm sure we'll really get into more of the extra deck later. But I've been thinking about this card as it relates to Heat Soul because Jaguar and Spinny are like the only monsters you can draw by themselves that can get you into Heat Soul. You just one card combo into Heat Soul. So if it's that plus 4 hand traps, what that really means is Heat Soul plus potentially 6 hand traps or 6 cards, which is really scary. Your opponent's starting with 6 cards, and you've got 6 interruptions for them, and then when it makes it back to your turn, you've got an additional draw plus whatever else you were able to set up. So uh, I've been thinking about maybe bumping Jaguar up to 3, but then another argument can maybe be made that you can potentially even drop it back down to 1 now. If you're it's different arguments for the same deck, because on the one hand, Jaguar can get you into Heat Soul on its own, but on the other hand, you kind of want to slim down on your monsters as much as possible. Not only because Circle is at 3, so any Circle is any monster in your deck, but also because you want to really put in more hand traps and make it so that almost every card you're drawing is a hand trap once you're into the engine, because Heat Soul, some of those draws are going to be on the opponent's turn, and you don't want to draw like a Sign at Mining, or you don't want to draw like a trap card or a strike or something on your opponent's turn. You want them to be, you don't want to draw that 3rd Jaguar. You want to draw like a DD Crow or something.
Right. I've always been on the side of 3 Jaguar because I love this card. I think that is just really impactful to open. Being able to get to this as soon as possible is really nice, but I could definitely understand cutting this down too because of those draws and how important they really can be.
Yeah. I'm still playing Desires. I love Desires, so I'm probably not going to go to 1 Jaguar. The games can get really tough when you lose your Jaguar. A lot of times it's tougher to play without a Jaguar than it is to play without a Gazelle.
Yeah, and we'll get into Desires too and some of the lists right now out there. I think that card's just way too important, especially in Salad of all decks, to just not run right. So I think that card's insane.
I agree.
Then the last main deck monster we have here is Foxy, and let's talk about how important that card is.
Yeah, let me talk about Foxy for a second. Falco's my favorite one, but Foxy is this is what makes this deck, how should I say, it's like, Salad is kind of similar to a lot of other decks in that it's like half hand traps, half a small engine that keeps you going, while the hand traps are just like, taking the legs up from the opponent. And the goal is to never play against like a full power board or a full power opponent. You're constantly just, flicking them in the head when they're trying to stand up. And then, when they don't stand up, you just OTK them in 1 turn with the access code. What makes this deck different is that it has cards like Foxy and Rage, that are built in out to like hard stops to a lot of decks. So one of the biggest, like probably the best Floodgate against this deck is there can be only one, and you have ways to like in-engine ways to deal with that card just by like, crashing your everything into their opponent, and then there's a Foxy in graveyard, you discard 1, summon the Foxy, pop, there can be only one, proceed to, combo, that kind of thing. You can do it to out anti-spells and skill drains and all that kind of stuff. I almost never use the on-summon effect, especially when I'm going second into any number of back row, like 2 back row or something, because it's just like if one of those is a skill drain, you need to deal with the skill drain like pretty immediately. So it's always just nice to keep it live if you can.
Yeah, do you ever feel like if someone's using the Foxy effect that they either have absolutely nothing, or do you feel like it's because their hand is too good?
That's a good question. Also, this is another one of those cards where you can only use one of the effects per turn. You can either, if there's a face-up spell trap, you can pitch a Salamangreat card to summon itself in the graveyard and pop a spell or trap card, face-up spell or trap card. Or on normal summon, you can, Pot of Duality, add a Salad card to your hand. The only times I find myself using that latter effect are if my hand has no interruptions and really no way to get there, and I'm trying to dig for one of their trap cards, or on the flip side, if my hand is just Foxy and all interruptions like hand traps, because then you're like, you're not going to be able to take advantage of the fact that Foxy can summon itself in the graveyard anyway, because you can't discard one of your hand traps. You don't have any Salamangreat cards. So at that point, you want to just like dig for a follow-up play, and then just like make Balinks, linked to using itself, set a bunch of cards, and then pass.
See, I played against this deck a ton, and every single time that I've ever seen someone resolve Foxy's first effect is usually because they have nothing. And I've kept that one pretty much so just in my head, because like the second effect is really strong in the Reborn, and the fact that they can extend pretty hard and go into like Stalio. And in my opinion, if they ever use that first effect, that's something that if I have the extra negation, I might just use it, because at that point I'm like, you're digging for something that you don't have.
Now here's something I might push back on that a little bit and say, because like I said, Foxy, you're only using that effect if the hands are not very diverse, if they're like one side or the other, like all hand traps or all monsters.
Right.
Um, if they're using the on summon effect, what you as an opponent need to be thinking is, okay, not only do they have a weird hand, whether it's bad or not, but it's weird. Now they don't have an extender. Assuming that it's all Salamangreats in their hand, they just they just threw one of their extensions and tossed it in the trash because they can't use that Foxy effect anymore.
Right.
So now if they commit to a play like Mirage Stalio or something, and you're able to interrupt that, it's unlikely that they're going to be able to recover because they don't have that free Foxy summon, discard Spinny, or just try to do anything crazy like that. It's like it makes the choke points that exist a lot tighter if they're having to use Foxy effect on field.
Yeah, and see, that's
So,
always.
but I wouldn't consider it a choke point itself. I would just say if you see them using that effect, you're probably going to end their turn with the ways you would normally try to interrupt their turn with like an Ash or something.
Yeah, and see, that's where I really like to have these devil advocate moments as well, because this is something that a lot of people probably wouldn't think about, right? It's just like, oh, if they use Foxy effect, they're just using an effect. And it's like, no, it actually is just like, their hand's
It tells you a
probably
lot about
pretty
their
weird.
hand. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that's what I make videos a lot about for everyone who's watching now. And you've seen like my read videos and like how to really view the format differently. And like these are the things that you really have to be paying attention to, because little things like this can really tell you a lot about what's going on in the game.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And that's a lot of value in the guides like these. It kind of gives you like a pilot's view of what's going on. And then when your opponent screws up, you can see like, wait a minute, I know what your hand is, even though I don't play your deck.
It's
Yeah,
definitely nice to
very
know.
valuable. Yep, definitely nice to know.
Going into like their main back row now, I feel like this is going to be another thing that we really want to talk about with like the numbers that you play, because we see different ratios in all of these all the time. But if we want to just give everyone like a brief explanation about what all these cards do.
Yeah. The first one you see there is Salamangreat Roar. People get these names confused. I do too. Roar and then Rage, and then that last one's Will. The Roar is a counter trap. If you control a Salamangreat Link monster, you can negate activation of an effect or activation of a monster or a spell trap. I don't think it negates effects of things that are already face up, and then destroy it. And it's got another effect which comes up sometimes if you link a Salamangreat Link monster into another copy of itself. It can activate in the graveyard to set itself, and then it banishes itself when it leaves the field. That comes up fairly often. And then the second card, their Rage, is, in my opinion, the best card in the deck.
Card
It's
insane.
so crazy. It's so versatile, and it makes like back row decks kind of free and stuff. It's like it's got two effects. The main one is you can target a Salamangreat Link that was used that was summoned using a copy of itself, and on resolution, it'll pop cards the opponent controls up to the number of the link rating of the monster. So normally you're popping 2 non-targeting by targeting Sunlight Wolf with it. And then the second effect, which in my opinion, I think it's probably going to come up more now, is you can send one Salamangreat card from your hand or field to the graveyard to target one card anywhere on the field and pop it. The reason I think this is going to come up more is if you draw this in your opening hand and you opt for the Heat Soul play and you're not able to put a Salamangreat like card anywhere pretty much, it's likely that you might draw into a Salamangreat card off of your or Salamangreat monster rather, off of your Heat Soul on your opponent's turn, and it makes it still live. Especially good if it's like a Foxy or a Spinny or something that gets value in graveyard.
No, that's a really good point. Yeah, I really like Rage too because it outs Mystic Mind in the main deck.
Yep, that's another thing I was saying about it being versatile. Is just like floodgates or weird cards or problem cards. It's like the out. The only weird thing that this deck struggles with that it doesn't have like an in-engine out to is stuff like Dragoon, where they're really big and they can't be targeted and they can't be destroyed. Because this access code is kind of your only way around Dragoon, unless you're playing some crazy spice, like maybe a what do you call it? Underworld Goddess? I don't know.
Yeah, cool card.
Cool card. And then Will the Salamangreat there is the last one. I play all of these at one, even though I play Desires, because in my opinion, you can play without any of these cards. You can still win and play like a full-on, like grindy match against good players and stuff without any of these cards and still win. But I would still like to play the one copy of Will because it does a lot of things. That's like your main out to nib. It's your main way to play around nib is you just hold it in your hand and then try to do your play, and then if they stop you, you just like nib back something, double Sunlight Wolf set of thing pass. But now I think there's combos where you can Gazelle, send Will, and then make the Heat Soul play, and then will back a Sunlight Wolf, possibly summon it using a copy of itself, and then you have your traps live in addition to Heat Soul. I haven't done that yet, and I haven't found that it comes up super often, but it is there. I prefer, if I have a Gazelle play now, I would prefer to send maybe like one of the level 4s. If I'm not sending a trap set, I can set up Babushka in addition to Heat Soul. I think that's pretty good this format.
I've heard Baguska's pretty good, yeah. It's a pretty insane card.
It is a pretty insane card. It makes me nervous because, in my opinion, another one of the strengths, one of the other durability factors of this deck is the fact that its interruptions, some of its interruptions are in the form of spells and traps, and some of it are in the form of monsters. So they can't just like lightning storm you and they took all your interruptions, and they can't like, dark ruler you and they took all your interruptions. You will still always have like a diverse range of different kinds of interruptions.
Yeah, I like that when you have Wolf plus Baguska as well, and then you have that because they can't hit you with the Dark Ruler because you have Roar.
Right, yeah, that's really nice, but kind of on the other side of that, it's like if you invest a lot of the monsters in your hand into Baguska plus like monsters and have none of the traps as negations, then they can just imperm your Baguska, go off, and just kill you.
True.
So you got to be kind of careful.
Very, very true. Moving on to the extra deck, we can start off with Stalio and Balinx. These two are pretty iconic for the deck. Stalio just coming back to 3, and Balinx always been at 3. I think that Balinx is really cool just because of like the Return of the Dragon Lords effect in the graveyard, right? Just being able to protect, and then the Stalio being able to bounce. How do you feel like the Stalio really impacted the deck when it came back to 1 versus to where it was before?
It affected primarily the grind game. So if you can call anything a restriction in this deck, it's definitely the Stalio. As soon as you resolve its effect to summon from the deck, the rest of the turn you can't activate monster effects except for fire monsters, which means you're not going to be able to do your access code standard OTK with like update jammer and stuff. You're not going to be able to use any of those effects after you resolve around Stalio. So the value that it brings is when either you're going first and you want to set up all your resources and you don't have to worry about damage, or it helps you like grind through boards. It can be a little bit more difficult to find game because you don't have that easy access code, but the fact that it does so many things and it moves resources around makes it kind of like a really tempting thing to hit on the opponent's part. It can also be protected by Balinx, so it's kind of like a I don't know. Like I said, you can win games without a lot of these cards. Like you can access code OTK and like all that kind of stuff going second without Barrage Stalio. But the fact that it exists just kind of draws interruptions to itself. And the things that you make it with are things that you can use again next turn, oftentimes. So it's just like it feels like a bait, but if it resolves, you don't set up like a bunch of damage. You set up like a bunch of resources that your opponent has to deal with.
Right, and it's also really nice. It's just like one of those other ways to Gazelle as well. So like, it's also just very nice to have.
Yeah, that's true as well.
And as far as Balinx go, it's just your Link 1 that gets you to your Sanctuary. That's also the protection. So pretty crazy.
It's so good. It's vital. One of the people always just roast Salad for being like, oh man, they just end on one monster and one back row and they like don't do anything. They take like a really long time to do this combo and they end on like nothing. It's like, well, it's not an interruption, but one of the interactions with your opponent is the fact that they have to kill Sunlight Wolf twice. It's small, but it's not that small. Like, not all of the normal summons in every deck are higher than 18, so they have to commit resources to special summon something to try to kill Sunlight Wolf, but they also have to do it twice in order to kill Sunlight Wolf. So it's actually a bigger investment of resources than it seems to try to get over a Sunlight Wolf backed up with a Phalanx. And that effect is just kind of tacked onto Phalanx for free. It's like it costs you nothing to do that. You still get your field spell. Even if it didn't have that effect, you'd still play it and still do the same thing. But now it's taking like twice as many good resources from the opponent to put up a threat to the Sunlight Wolf, which is a little underrated by some people, I think.
So we're talking a lot about Sunlight Wolf. For those of the people who have not played this deck before and don't know what this deck is, let's go ahead and move on over to the Sunlight Wolf and the Heat Leo. So just to say a couple things here, Sunlight Wolf on the left here is definitely going to be one of the most impactful extra deck monsters we have in the deck. Just a lot of your grind game, a lot of your recursion. On the right is Heat Leo, and this one allows you to go ahead and target a card in your opponent's spell and trap card zone and then shuffle it into the deck, which is really cool because if you reincarnate it, then you can summon out another one and do it again, and you can really start picking apart through back row. But the funny thing is, now with Heat Soul, we don't see Heat Leo in the extra deck. Do you want to talk about why we see that?
Yeah. I love Heat Leo. I think it's a great card. It's like you said, it chews through back row. It's one of those cards, kind of like Stalio, where it like forces your opponent either to do something or lose cards in a terrible way too. It doesn't just like send them to the graveyard or something so they get their Eldritch effects. It just removes them, puts them back in the deck, which is great.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of an investment because it's 3 monsters. That still is not really much of a problem for Salad. I think the main problem is that it's so matchup specific. It's great against back row decks, but you're committing 2 of your extra deck slots to it in order to do that. And some people are just, I guess, deciding that's not worth it. They'd rather reserve those spots for different cards. So some people I have seen playing Heat Leo and Heat Soul, and they would be cutting cards like Lingeribo, which I'm playing right now. And you can kind of go either way. Lingeribo does a similar thing to Heat Leo. It like deals with back row. But the reason I think we'll probably migrate away from Heat Leo if you're going for the Heat Soul build is because the Lingeribo, which is one of the things that you would cut, is one of your more reliable ways to get into Heat Soul. You can, like any combination of Salad monsters does to your Sunlight Wolf thing, you can set up all your resources with it, and then you just turn your last Salamangreat monster into a Lingeribo, and then you have 2 different attributes, and there's Heat Soul. So it's more of a opportunity cost argument. It's like Heat Leo's great, everybody loves Heat Leo, but there's just not room anymore.
Yeah, it's also nice because it can put something pretty low, especially if there's like an Ashen Grave. You can put something to like 0 attack on the board too, which can come up sometimes.
Yeah, that effect comes up a lot, yeah.
So like it is a nice card to have, but you'll see a lot more soon that like a lot of people are just cutting the Heat Leo. So which is kind of surprising because it was such a staple for so long. But like, you know, sometimes the deck innovates and you just see other cards get cut.
People have been talking about cutting Heat Leo for a long time now, I think, in favor of, like, a few formats ago, people were wanting to play, like, multiple packages of the transcode access code, like 2 transcode, 2 access code, and just cutting the Heat Leos. That's not a bad idea either, in my opinion, but, yeah, if we had, like, a bigger extra deck, you'd put Heat Leo in, but now, yeah, just not needed.
Fair.
Sunlight Wolf, on the other hand. 3 of, and you can't go lower. If you could play more, you'd probably play more. Maybe it'd let you be more reckless with your plays, but this card does everything. Recycles your monsters, recycles your Ash Blossoms, recycles. If a monster is summoned to one of its 2 zones, you can non-targeting add a fire monster back to your hand from your graveyard, including Ash Blossom, including, you know, Dogran if you're playing Kaijus or whatever. And its other effect is if it was summoned using a copy of itself, you can activate its effect and add a Salamangreat spell or trap card back from your graveyard to your hand. It can do that every turn. So if your opponent can't deal with it and you set it up with something like, you know, Rich, there's too many specifics to go into. It does everything. It recycles everything every turn. All
your circles, all your rages, and then you can like you can add back rage and like use Roar's effect to reset itself, and you have both. So there's a lot of really cool situations. Sunlight Wolf.
And then Jaguar recycles the Sunlight Wolf itself, so you can play forever. If you had, you know, unlimited cards in your deck, you could make a play every single turn and never run out of stuff.
So moving away from a lot of the basic interactions in the deck and like what the deck really is, just for those of you who haven't really played the deck before, I feel like that's just really helpful for you that you get to know a lot of that information, so you kind of know what you're getting yourself into. Moving into a lot more of the very specific questions that I have for you in particular that I think that a lot of people who have been playing the deck a lot longer are going to appreciate. Starting off with, which one do you think was more impactful, Circle to 3 or Desires to 2?
That's a good question. I'd have to say probably Circle, but I think they both were impactful in different ways. They both kind of fundamentally affect the way the deck is built. I talked a little bit earlier about Jaguar. So if you're playing multiple Desires, it can be kind of weird to just play one Jaguar, because if you banish it, you don't have a grind game very much. On the other hand, multiple Circle encourages you to play fewer monsters and more circles. Like you keep your monster ratio the same, but now, where you would be drawing your third Spinny or your third Foxy, you're now drawing your new copy of Circle, and that just gets you Gazelle. So they're kind of impactful on opposite ends of the spectrum. And because of that, I think deck lists will kind of stay similar to how they were. I think like a lot of 2-ofs of the salad monsters feels right. If you banish one, it's fine. You just still have more copies of Circle to get to the one copy that you need, etc., etc. The reason I think Circle is more impactful is because it lets you more reliably go for combos that require Gazelle, instead of like, here's a Spinny combo that doesn't require Gazelle, and it gets you into like this end board. Now it's just like, well, instead of drawing that Spinny, you could draw Circle, and now here's a Gazelle combo instead, which is better.
Yeah, I really do think that this is a question, though, because like we just saw the salad list that topped and won Ecuador, and they weren't playing Pot of Desires. They weren't playing
Desires, yeah.
So that's where this question came from, and really saying like, hey, Desires come to 2, and there's a lot of decks right now that are really saying like, this card's really necessary, and I agree. I love Desires. Desires is a +1. Yeah, the card's insane. So like, it's really hard to believe that like people wouldn't play it. So I really wanted to entertain this question just to see what you would have to say about it.
Yeah, there is one more thing I was thinking about with the Circle though, which is if you have more circles, and I found this playing at the last tournament I was in, you tend to see more often than before 2 circles in your opening hand, which leads into a lot more situations where the second effect is live. The second effect, the secret effect, yes, of it, as many call it. It's if you control a Salamangreat Link monster that was summoned using a copy of itself, you can activate Circle and target that monster, and after it resolves, that monster is unaffected by other card effects except for its own effect. For the rest of the other monster effects, excuse me, I don't know if I said monster card, but that can get pretty relevant, especially in combination with that Balinks phenomenon that I was talking about earlier. It's just like there's an 1800 attack Sunlight Wolf sitting on the field, but now you can't get rid of it by card effects. Or monster effects. You can only get rid of it by battle, and also you have to kill it by battle twice. It like makes it a lot more difficult to deal with, and that effect's going to come up a lot more often because it's not like a opportunity cost argument anymore. It's not like, do I use it to search Gazelle or do I use it to protect my monster? It's like, well, now you do both because you drew 2.
Moving into the next one too is, do you really think that Heat Soul just makes the deck outright?
I kind of. There's kind of 2 different ways to play now. Also contributes to deck building and all that kind of stuff. But now it's like, well, I should say, so before your usual combo would end on like Sunlight Wolf, one of the searched trap cards, and then a few hand traps, like what other interruptions you drew. Now, sometimes you just end on Heat Soul and like 6 cards in hand. It encourages you to play more hand traps in your deck because you're going to be drawing them on the opponent's turn, and they're still usable. The problem, I think, is you're either going to be drawing into... Sometimes you're not going to be drawing hand traps. Sometimes you're going to be drawing things like Signet Mining. on your opponent's turn. You're going to be like, crap, I need to be playing fewer of these cards because they're just not useful. Comes back to opportunity cost. Instead of setting up Sunlight Wolf plus trap card, I chose to set up Heat Soul, which gets me 2 draws. So I have to hope that those 2 draws that it got me are more impactful than the trap card plus the recyclability of the trap card, which is kind of a tall order sometimes. And especially considering the other downside of playing Heat Soul, which is it's not a Salamangreat monster. So if you're making it with things like Spinny or Jaguar, you're not going to be able, like if it survives, you're not going to be able to use those resources next turn without another monster in play somewhere. You either have to draw it off Heat Soul or you have to have had it in your hand, which means it was 1 fewer interruptions that you used on the previous turn. So if your opponent sets up Heat Soul and hand traps, all you have to do is clear the Heat Soul and they don't have any plays anymore. They're back to top decking to try to find some kind of engine, which is kind of dangerous. I kind of wish there was maybe there is, maybe I haven't done enough testing with the deck, but there needs to be a way to set up Heat Soul, maintain all the cards that you have, but then also like get a Salamangreat monster guaranteed in hand so you can still play next turn.
Yeah, it also depends on if you have like a Foxy Engrave, a Stank on board, and a Salamangreat card in hand. So that's the only other way that you're playing the game.
And that's kind of like the other part of that argument is if you already had another Salamangreat card in hand, like a monster in hand for the follow-up, you could have committed it in combination with your other cards to make like a Baguska. You could have ended on like Heat Soul plus Baguska and some hand traps, or you can end on Heat Soul plus some hand traps plus a follow-up card, which is like the latter is not as strong, but if they break the first one, you're just completely toast.
Yeah, so it definitely ends up being a point of what do you think is the better play style for the format, especially.
Yeah, for sure.
And if there's any decks that can just kill you, because if they can, then it becomes very risky, especially not having a protected void or like a rage or what have you.
Another thing about this card, I feel like I'm talking about this card forever, but another thing about this card that comes up a lot is it makes your side deck more important. This is another thing that comes up with more desires and stuff too, is you got Flame Buffalo, which is drawing you 2 cards. You've got Pot of Desires, which is drawing you 2 cards. And you got Heat Soul, which is drawing you 2 cards. So that's 6 cards that are not non-search targets that you're drawing off the top of your deck. So your side deck cards need to just be blowouts because you have so many opportunities to draw them and just end the game. And it's especially helpful if they're hand trap blowouts. So things like Droll and Lockbird, I think, are really strong in this deck now. Main or side, as well as like if Lancia is going to be this format that would be another good one, or like Nibiru or stuff. Those are some things that I'm citing because you want high impact hand trap side deck cards because you have a higher chance of drawing them in this deck than with a lot of other decks.
Token Collector, yeah.
Token Collector as well. Yep, Token Collector as well.
Card's crazy. I love that card.
Yes, yes, it is.
So moving on to the next one, another card that we're talking about with the sideboard though is Crossout Designator. Is this card necessary in the deck, or is it fine to not run it?
No, you don't have to run it. I was running it. It's not necessary. I won't go into it too much, but it's great in mirror matches. It's probably great in the Despia deck itself. I think the main argument to play it in here is that it stops Nibiru. And if you're going with that argument, you have to consider that a lot of the decks that you're playing against are not going to be hurt very much by Nibiru, which means you're putting in a Nibiru just so you can cross out it. And then the stars kind of have to align, right? Because you have to be in games 2 or 3, because you side decked this. You have to draw the Crossout Designator. You have to not have drawn the Nibiru. You have to have drawn a play that needs protection from Nibiru. And your opponent has to have drawn Nibiru. Maybe I'm just not thinking deeply enough about this, but just thinking about those data points by themselves, it gets me thinking there's probably a better card I can side in than Crossout Designator that's more of a blowout than this thing that will not come up very often the way I want it to come up. Sometimes it might stop a little hand trap like an Ash or like something like that, but this deck can play a lot through a lot of those hand traps. The only one that can't play through very well is Nibiru. So I think the cross out question is tied to the Nibiru question.
Yeah.
And I just don't think it's worth it. You probably play something else.
See, I feel like that's true, and like we have, you know, like our win cons and what have you in this deck that like you really need to go off. And so a lot of people, they really are afraid of things like Nibiru in the game. But as we'll talk about here in a little bit, I feel like there's some cards that this deck can just inherently side because it doesn't hurt them, that hurt the other matchup even worse. So even if you get stuck with a Nibiru on your board, as long as you have this Floodgate, like, you really have no problems, because some of these Floodgates can really just like end these other decks because they cannot play under them. So like where you're feeling like you might be in a really bad situation, it's the same thing as when people sided in like Gozen in Dragon Link because they're afraid of their board getting like dark rulered, but then they flip Gozen on their opponent and then it just like turn skip their opponent anyway.
Yeah, it passes back.
Yeah. So it's kind of like siding for your opponent's sideboard, which I think is always the better way to side.
And this deck has an advantage in doing that, like I said, because it's drawing so many cards compared to other opponents.
Yeah, and so like even if we're looking at this deck too, like the main win con is going Update Jammer into access code, which I mean is another thing that everyone just knows this deck for right now, and that's all I think that the deck really can do is just like, you know, go access code turbo. And where
something I see so often is people go first, they set up a board, I try to break through it a little bit, and then they'll like DD Crow the, you know, thing that I send off Gazelle, or they'll, you know, Veiler or Imperm the Sunlight Wolf or whatever while I'm setting up resources, and I'm just like, all right, update jam their OTK.
Yeah.
When they could have just stopped it for the whole game by just waiting for me to go update jammer OTK, and then they just DD Crow the update jammer out of the graveyard, or they Veiler the transcode, or they Veiler the or they imperm the transcode, or they do either of those things to access code. It's just like it's known for it, but it seems like people don't think about it during the game, and when they don't, they just lose. If they are thinking about it during the game, those are the actual good games, because then it's like you're trying to set up your resources, planning for the idea that if you don't get through all your opponent's responses, they're going to interrupt the access code, and you're going to need to still play another turn. So I think what people don't like playing against this deck for, you know, a lot of reasons. One of the main reasons, I think, is because it feels like they're just flopping around and quote unquote not doing anything. They're like, you know, why don't you just access code OTK me? It's like, well, they have to plan for the risk that you'll stop them before they go for the access code OTK. So when they're just like doing all their Sunlight Wolf stuff and whatever, it seems all boring and you're just sitting there with no interruptions. It's just like, you know, at that point you could probably just scoop, because they have to do all that stuff just in case you happen to Nibiru.
Yeah.
So they're going to go through the whole song and dance, and then they're going to OTK with access code. So at least they should.
Yeah, it's always going to be the bread and butter play and just like what they want to do here. But the deck can still grind, though. Is the biggest message that I want to get across in this video, is that it still has the ability to do that. And as we were talking about, can be mained or sided, usually just sided, but Rivalry, Goes in Match, Anti-Spell, these are all very impactful cards this format. And this is something where if your deck can run some of the best cards in the format, I feel like it has an edge. I feel like if your sideboard can really be able to use the cards that just affect most of the meta, especially being Floodgates, where like even if you're going second and you can like semi-break the board and set up one of these, a lot of times they just can't play the game anymore. And I really like that a lot. I think that gives this deck a lot of the edge that it has, and like the grind game and the draw ability of a lot of these cards too. I think that's just really nice. Yeah,
I agree. These cards have kind of always been played in side decks, and this is where the ideas deviate a little bit from the Heat Soul strategy. Is it's like if you draw a Rivalry in your opening hand, maybe you want to set up a different board than the Heat Soul, or you know, do you set up Heat Soul and try to draw a Rivalry during your own turn, or do you risk like not drawing the Rivalry off the Heat Soul draw, and then it's the opponent's turn and you draw during their draw phase and draw the Rivalry, and that kind of sucks. It's like, you know, do you want to play the trap Floodgates, or do you want to play the turn-ending hand traps like Lancia and stuff? I don't think necessarily those questions are mutually exclusive, but I think that question will come up when building a side deck. I personally would probably play, one or maybe two of those particular cards. These floodgates. Anti-spell seems very good.
Yeah, very, very good right now.
Yeah,
Especially against Despia. The card
especially against Despia. Yep, and you flip it in their draw phase, and even if they drew the like the super poly to deal with your Baguska, they can't use it because they need a monster on the field first, and you just flip it during the draw phase.
They
have to set it, and then they have to wait for your whole turn, and then you pop it face down with your access code, and it's like, yeah, they're out to Baguska is no longer an out with anti-spell.
Yeah, card's very, very good. I'm a big fan of anti-spell when it's not used against me,
Right, yeah, of course. The bane of your life right now that Io's gone.
Yeah, I mean, it's easier to deal with, but like it's still annoying. Now I have a very cool question for you. We have this card that's been in the game for a little while.
Okay.
Nightmare Corruptor Ibly. And so we have the Salamangreat field spell that also says that you can make your own monster 0 attack, which is equally cool because that means that you can make them crash an Ibly into your wolf, and then it can't die because 0 can't kill 0. Where do you feel like Ibly is at in this format? Do you think it's insane? Because I feel like if you played with Ibly against like Sword Soul or Despia, like they literally have 0 outs to that card. I think it's cool. What do you think?
It is cool. This I played with Ibly a little bit when this deck first came out, and the lessons, the quote unquote lessons I learned from playing this have kind of stuck with me all the way until now. And it's similar to the cross out question that I was talking about earlier. If you main deck this card,
right,
you have to be okay with drawing it going second, and it's 150% useless.
True.
If you go first, you have to see it in your opening hand. Or you can search it with Signet Mining, but now you're committing your Signet Mining search to this thing, which is essentially a floodgate that could potentially be outed, when you could have been searching a salad monster to set up your like grindy engine and stuff. So I guess in that way, it's also similar to Heat Soul. It's an investment, and if it doesn't pay off, you lose the game.
True.
And I never find that it's worth the risk. Even in prior formats, I haven't found it worth the risk because I want every single card that I'm drawing to be useful all the time. If I'm drawing a Salamangreat monster, it can potentially go for game on its own. If I'm drawing a hand trap, it's trading with at least one of my opponent's cards, especially post side deck. I never, ever want to be drawing a single card that just doesn't do anything. That's the strength of this deck, is that all the cards do something except Sanctuary, and you're already playing one of those, and you have to play that one, so you can't play more.
Right.
In my opinion.
Yeah, I think that it's a really cool idea. It's something that was talked about, and I think that against specifically Sword Soul and Despia, it definitely shows some promise. But it's something that the deck has played before, and I felt like it'd just be something nice to mention again, just because of the application it could have in the format. But again, it is one of those things that you literally have to see it, and if you don't, it's rough.
This might be a good time to break it out and do some testing with it again. I think that anybody who's thinking about picking up this deck, try it out. Let us know how it goes. Might be an option for the side deck when you know you're going first, just because it's so bad going second. But who knows?
Yeah, I agree with that. It's the same thing as like Fluanderee's Scary Sea, right? Like that card's insane, but no one actually plays that card.
Yeah, so that's the same reason.
Everyone was so terrified of that card when it was announced. Everyone's like, "What is this?" And then all of a sudden, no one played it.
He's saying I can't summon any monsters, and then the deck is just like, "Well, yeah, you can't summon any monsters anyway."
Yeah. So I have another question for you though, because I actually really enjoy this package, and no one plays this anymore because it isn't as relevant as it used to be. But the Fusion of Fire package, I thought this was pretty cool.
This I'm not necessarily against. Yeah.
How do you feel about this?
I think this card is good, but not in combination with Fusion of Fire, but probably with Super Poly.
That's fair.
You can sweep up your opponent's Link monsters, which is a little niche. There aren't not every deck relies on Link summoning nowadays. But some decks make things like Salamangreat Almirage, which is kind of funny. You can just like Super Poly with both of their monsters, the Salamangreat and the non-Salamangreat. It would be nice if there was an easier Super Poly target. So when I'm thinking about this card, I'm basically exclusively thinking about Super Poly.
Gotcha.
There's no value that it brings other than the fact that you can use it as a super poly target. But I can't think of any decks that are just devastated by having their Link monster just super polyed away by it.
Right. I figured it used to be very relevant, so it's something just to like bring it back up again, just to see if it's time again or not.
Yeah, I don't know if it's time, but maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe soon.
Cool card. Cool engine.
Mm.
So let's talk about your top 8 case tourney list from yesterday. How do you feel like the list performed? Sure. Is there anything that you would like to change out of it?
The main deck was great. The side deck was complete and utter trash. Let's see. There are a few things in here that I guess were kind of coming to mind while I was building this thing. The first is that 1 copy of Valor and 1 copy of Bell. Those were 2 copies of Bell. But I wanted to diversify the different kinds of hand traps as much as I could because I knew I'd be drawing multiple copies of the same one off of Heat Soul. So the only one that I played multiple copies of that can't be used in the same turn is Ash, just because I wanted to see Ash as many times as possible for the branded fusions, and because you can often play it on your own turn and on the opponent's turn. So like drawing 2 is not that bad. And also you can recycle it with the Sunlight Wolf. But all the other ones is like I didn't want to draw 2 Bell. Like I said, you want to be able to use every single card that you have at any point in the game. So that was the theory there. I might change up the hand traps that are in the main deck. That is something that could happen. Cosmic Cyclones. I was expecting a bit of Eldritch and some other like trap decks or like Mystic Mind decks that I might just get like cheesed by sometimes. This deck can. Let's see. I don't want to go too much into things that aren't here, but I used to play Strike in this deck a few formats ago, and that was an out to Mystic Mine because you could like try to make a Link monster, like make all the things that you have into a Link monster, and then you strike the summon, and then their thing dies at the end phase. I'm not playing Strike anymore, so I needed some kind of out to the mines. I knew there was going to be at least 1 mine deck there. The extra deck is fine. Nightmare Phoenix could be something different. Maybe that the goddess, underworld goddess. Yeah, maybe that's an option if you're real scared of dragoons or whatever. And then the side deck pretty much just needs a full overhaul. The things I think I would keep are Nibs, for reasons stated earlier. Red Reboot, also for reasons stated earlier. How crazy is it to draw into Red Reboot off of Heat Soul on your opponent's turn? You're just
insane.
Like, yeah. And then pretty much my whole side deck was built around the Heat Soul theory, where I just want to draw them on my opponent's turn. I really regret the crossouts in there though. Like some matchups where I was scared of the Nib and stuff, I still didn't even side them in. I'm just like, if it happens, it happens. And I'll just try to hand trap them and try to build a board again next turn. Like that seems like a better option than just drawing a dead crossout and then having them not have a hand trap, and then it's just a dead card that I'm not using.
Sure.
That's not the same. That argument can't be used in every deck, but in this deck especially, it seems like you just need to use every single card. Let's see. No, I think that's about it. No Lady Debug. I don't think that card's good at all.
No, Buffalo's so much better.
Buffalo's way better, yeah. It makes it durable, like I said. It makes the deck rugged. You summon a Buffalo, and they're looking at their hand, and they're just like, well, there's an incredibly limited number of things I can do about that Buffalo drawing you 2 cards. They summon Lady Debug, and they're just like, oh, okay, half my deck can stop your Lady Debug.
But Buffalo, it's so funny because you're like, what are you gonna do? Banish it with Mirror Jade? But
right.
Pick 1, draw 2.
That's exactly right.
Summon Gazelle, like,
yep.
That's my favorite. I love Buffalo. Besides Ray, that's got to be my favorite normal summon in the game. It's just so strong.
It's so safe. Yeah, it's safe just like Ray. So in a similar way, you summon it, and it's just like you've already won the interaction just by summoning it.
Yeah, they're like, well, that's in the game now. Like, how do we deal with this?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I appreciate you being here with me today and doing the salad guide. I feel like this is one of those decks that a lot of people might just be like, yeah, like we know how to play the deck. But I feel like there's still a fair amount of people that I've been meeting recently who are like, this is my first regional, or I haven't been to an event yet, and like they're all new to the game. So whenever we see an old deck like Salad come back into play, I really want to make a video like this, especially because the deck, it truly is really inexpensive right now, and it's something that if you just need something to pick up and you want to play the game, like this is a fantastic option for you. And this is something that I feel like has a lot of promise. Even if it's not going to be like the best deck of the format, it's still something that's going to be very usable, something that can very much so adapt to a format. And this is just the video to really be able to explain to you a lot of the nuances, a lot of how the deck works, how it functions, and some of the thought processes behind the deck before you pick it up.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. Hope I didn't ramble too much. I just love talking about this deck. It's such a fun deck, and I encourage anybody just getting into the game or coming back after a while and not knowing what to play, just try it out. It's really fun. Drawing cards is always fun, and this deck draws a lot of cards, so have fun.
Draws a lot of cards. But again, I appreciate you. If you're all new here, definitely go ahead and join my Discord, my Twitch, my Twitter. All the links are in the description below. And if you want a coaching session over on Metafy, definitely go over there, check it out, and pick one if you'd like. If you have any questions about it, PM me on Discord. Any last thoughts for the video today?
I don't think so. Thank you so much, and hope everybody has a great rest of the day.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Have a great one.